I thought we'd reach out to one of my best friends in broadcasting. His name is Mark Farzetta. He is a great sports commentator, has been for a number of years in Philadelphia. His own show is called The Farzy Show. You can catch it on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, FarzyShow.com. That's F-A-R-Z-Y, FarzyShow.com. So, Mark, welcome in. Organized crime, and I think of you. I don't know how you take that.
Well, because we're friends, hilariously. But this is, first of all, congrats on all your continued success, my man. It's great to catch up with you. This story is the greatest threat to sports, really, in America. And I know that there's a fine line between gambling and taking gamblers' advertising money and websites and apps and all that. And there's another line on the other side of that there where players and leagues themselves can't participate in it, or this is going to happen. 34 and counting, by the way, indictments by the FBI for sports gambling and illegal poker games involving former and current coaches and players in the NBA. This is a great threat, similar to Tim Donaghy in 2007, a referee, if your listeners aren't familiar, that was rigging games and calling games to help his own sports bets and the mafia as well. This is a great threat, the biggest that sports could have.
That was my first thought in talking to someone who does what you do for a living, talk about sports. The integrity of sports. You know this. I've been hearing that. Look, as a Kansas City Chiefs fan, I've been hearing it ad nauseum for the last several years. It's rigged for the Chiefs. It's rigged for the Chiefs. I said, well, that's fine until the Chiefs don't win, and they haven't been lately. And I say, well, then, like when they don't win, is it rigged, right? So the thing is, when people shout it's rigged, it's rigged, it's rigged, and you've heard this as much as anybody, the integrity of sports, as you know it, is up for grabs here, and this scandal, I guess, furthers that argument that all sports is rigged. So what do you do with it as a sports talk show host who literally talks about the games?
Yeah, the greatest threat is, like you said, the integrity. And it's if you're not watching something that you think is legitimate, then you're likely not going to bet on it, and you're probably not going to follow it either. And that's something that the league will punish players for. That's why when you see greater issues happen off the surface of play, I'm just going to throw this out as an example, but this is the one I get thrown at me all the time. Why is it that a player can be arrested for domestic violence and there's sometimes maybe a suspension, but a guy gets caught gambling and he's suspended for a year? Where's the right in that? Well, morally speaking, there is no right in that. That's wrong. That's terrible. One is far more serious than the other. But what is the bigger threat to the game is the integrity being questioned by the viewing audience. I believe there's only room for one WWE professional wrestling where everyone's kind of in on the joke, where, yeah, sure, the wrestling's real, but the outcome is decided. But I think people follow that much more for the entertainment value of that and not the competition like they follow the NBA or the NFL, for instance. That's where things really get called into question, where guys will get punished greatly, not just by the league, but obviously in this case, the federal government.
Mark Farzetta with us, host of his own wildly successful show called The Farzy Show. You can catch that at FarzyShow.com, F-A-R-Z-Y. Listen to ESPN's Brian Windhorst and what he had to say yesterday. Number 38 here, Paul. This is kind of jaw-dropping if what he's alleging is true. Listen.
The NBA at some point is going to have to explain why Terry Rozier was allowed to keep playing. And I just want to point something out. Mm-hmm. The sports books caught the irregular betting on Terry Rozier the day it happened, the morning it happened, when all of a sudden there was hundreds of thousands of dollars coming in on Terry Rozier unders for a relatively meaningless game in March, mm-hmm. involving the Charlotte Hornets. The sports books caught it. They told the NBA right away, and guess what? The NBA, Rozier didn't play the rest of the season, and he had faked the injury, so it wasn't because of the injury. The NBA pulled him. They pulled Jonte Porter too. They flagged Jonte Porter and pulled Jonte Porter. The NBA's measures, mm-hmm. their protection measures, the sportsbook's protection measures triggered this. They caught it.
Uh-huh. Farzy, what that seems to imply is the sports books did their level best. They had triggers in place to alert the league something was up. The league said, okay, thanks for the information, and took these guys off the court, kind of dispatched with them for the season. but didn't address anything else, meaning maybe they knew this and sat on it? Do you believe that's what he's saying? And if so, what does that mean for the NBA at large?
It could mean two things. One, that the NBA is just as corrupt as anything else, or it could also mean that the NBA was aware that there was a bigger investigation going on and didn't want to tip anybody off to shut things down for a time being while things cooled down. But this is something that has happened. This is what's alleged, especially with Terry Rozier. Jonte Porter is another former NBA player that apparently got himself into some gambling debts and thought he could help his own cause by essentially shaving numbers, as it's referred to. So that's where the biggest question comes in, is how much is this affecting games? If you're leaking information to bettors, as Chauncey Billups, current head coach of the Portland Trailblazers, an NBA Hall of Famer, an NBA champion, is being accused of doing, then that's not affecting the game, obviously. That's affecting the betting world, which is still not a good thing for the NBA and their sponsors. But if you're physically, as a player, taking yourself out, you are rigging games. That is the absolute definition of it. So that's where the NBA has its bigger problems. Now, the other part of this is the poker tournament, or the poker games, the illegal poker games that are going on that also involve Chauncey Billups and all that. But that doesn't affect what goes on in the court either. The thing
can I ask you about that quickly?
Sure,
I just wanted to jump in and ask you, do you think these poker games that the coach out there in Portland, this Chauncey Billups, do you think that is unrelated, in that he didn't know anything about what these players are doing and the prop bet rigging? He's just taking cash to legitimize big shot poker games with organized crime. Is that possible, that two things are going on simultaneously and they're not related, other than the crime families?
Yeah, I do not think for a second that these are unrelated. If you're in that crowd, you're in on that crowd. And if you're in on that crowd, you might owe that crowd some money, and you're going to find other ways other than paying up to make sure that they make their money back. That's what I read between the tea leaves. That's not necessarily written out word for word in the indictment, but I have to believe that if you're playing in that world, you are in that world. And if that world wants you to do other things to help them, they're going to find a way to make you do those other things. Simple as that. There's one story, for instance, of one guy who owes $1.8 million who played in these poker games that were absolutely rigged, and the games were using high tech to read basically what was going on in the game to extort the person that was there at the table. So the guest, with four other players playing, supposedly. So there's a lot that goes into it. I have to think if you're playing at that table, then you're not just playing at that table, you're playing in other ways as well.
For all of you who do what you do, Mark, this sort of strikes at the heart of your very business, because you talk about and analyze sports. And if people, and I don't think we're there yet, but if the public at large begins to believe that you're just commentating on nothing but, like you said, WWE across all the major sports leagues, then it all kind of becomes silly and nonsense. I mean, so when you hear people say to you at this hour in 2025, it's all rigged, Mark, everything's rigged, the refs, the flags, the whole thing on Sunday, on football, rigged. What's your answer? What do you say?
They're not wrong, unfortunately. It's the only part that I would argue is the all part of it. There are portions of this, and look, my naivete left a long time ago when I was a child. I don't think anything's 100% legitimate, especially when you got millions and billions available. So that, call me a skeptic, whatever you want to call it. But this is further proof that there are going to be inner workings affecting the outcome of games. And whether or not players playing in games, whether or not players are available, certainly affects the outcome of a game. If you have a player taking himself out and not being available because of a parlay, essentially, building a parlay and a player prop and all that, that affects the game, and that makes the game illegitimate. And that, again, is the greatest threat to sports right now out there. Not just in America,
do you think could you come in? I'm not one for government regulation, generally speaking, but do we need to come in and say just no more prop betting, no more saying, Travis Kelce's only going to catch 3 footballs this game. I think he's going to catch less than that. None of that prop betting for people that don't know what that is. If you do away with that, does it make it less corrupt?
Yes, I believe it would, because that's a lot easier to just grab one person and get a hold of them and then change the outcome for what their outcome is. That's a lot easier to do. I don't see that happening because there's a lot of money that I'll say is legitimate money, although still gambling money, obviously, that is caught up in that. A lot of people love doing those because you don't have to win a game. You just have to essentially ride a hot streak of a player that, normally only scores 15 points a game, but all of a sudden they're averaging 20 points per game. You want to jump on that trend without really having to know the outcome of the game. So that's a lot of money is tied up into that. But as far as regulation goes, I think the FBI, I think the powers that be are going to be cracking down on this. Listening to Kesh Patel yesterday talk about this, it sounded like this was something that was only the beginning. And as these guys get indicted, 34 is the number right now, but as these guys are brought in, they're going to be talking. I'm sure they're going to be naming names. They're going to be trying to strike deals, and then we're going to get more names out of this. But to the average fan, I will tell you that when you watch a game, you can feel good about the fact that this is a small percentage of people. I do believe it's a small percentage. Two reasons I believe that is they would have indicted a heck of a lot more and not three names in a sport. They would have indicted a lot more. They also would have had this gone on for longer in other sports, monitoring this as well. And when you just talk about the commissioner of the NFL, for instance, or Adam Silver in the NBA, these are guys that understand the threat this is to the legitimacy of their sport.
Isn't this tougher, Mark? Basketball is such an individual sport. One guy taking himself out of a game can disrupt the game big time in its outcome. It's harder to do that with football, baseball, hockey, and the like. True? In baseball, you could go up there and just not get a hit, and people could bet the under for you not getting a hit. That's another, player prop, for instance. But yeah, basketball is an interesting one too, where you take yourself out of the game, and that obviously makes you hit every under. What some other, I can't technically call them gambling, but essentially they're like fantasy leagues and all that. What some sites have started to do is something maybe that other betting sites will embrace, which is if a player leaves a game early for injury, they wipe it off the books, and there's essentially no bet. Ah, yeah.
So
something will have to move there. Farzy, I am so grateful for your perspective on this because I know it's going to be a hot subject. It's not going away. As this story continues to percolate, can I have you back?
I'd be my honor. Always great to catch up with you and your esteemed producer, Eddie, of course.
Likewise, my friend. Thank you so much. That's Mark Farzetta, who shares great taste in hair and beard, facial hair. Thank you, Mark. Good to talk to you, buddy.
Cigars.
Have a great day. And cigars, that's right. The San Cristobal. Mwah.
The Chris Stigall Show Podcast.